This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale is our year-end episode. Arizona is in the Holiday Bowl on Friday night. Can you believe it? What a show we have, by the way, for you, Shane. We recorded these interviews a little bit earlier, but we spoke with our buddy Barrett Baker, going to talk Holiday Bowl, and Reggie Geary going to talk Arizona basketball with the Big 12 season starting on Saturday. Shane, are you excited or what?
You know what? I'm getting there. It doesn't like the Holiday Bowl. We're gonna go out there. I'm making a little family trip out of it. You and I are gonna meet up and go to the game together. I'm looking forward to it. It doesn't feel real just yet because I'm still kind of in the fog between Christmas and New Year's, and I got one more day of work to go as of this recording. So, we got to drive out there. So it doesn't feel real yet, but no, I'm looking forward to it. And like I told you before we started recording, my only hope is that this game is quite a bit more competitive than the last Holiday Bowl we went to, because I never want to think about that game ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it was as bad as it gets, but I'll tell you what, I think Arizona is going to come to play. We'll get some picks. Barrett will make his pick. You and I will make our picks. I have no idea what you're going to do. You could probably assume what I'm going to do, but that's what makes it fun on this program. So this is not really a standard buy or sell, but it is still presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Shane, tell us about some people want some late holiday gifts maybe. What can they get at Ice Shaker?
Yeah, it's called our 2025 Year in Review presented by Ice Shaker.
There you go. Okay.
There you go. The 40-ounce Legacy Series. Beautiful. They had just added some new colors as well. Keeps your drinks cold, hot, whatever. Cold in my case. Check them out at iceshaker.com. Our buddy Chris Gronkowski founded the company. You want to support a fellow Wildcat, go over there and pick out one of some very nice Ice Shaker items, some of which are logoed in Arizona Wildcats logos, both past and present.
And there you have it. All right, let's get right into it. So you and I on our year-end episode last year made some predictions. You said that men's basketball would make the NCAA tournament and softball would make it to Oklahoma City. Well, you went 1-1, but hey, baseball made it to Omaha, so I'll give you kind of partial credit there. I said that football would go 6-6 and make a bowl game, and I also said that Deion Sanders would not coach another game at Colorado. So we each went 1-1 there. Before we make our picks for 2026, let's talk about our favorite Arizona moments of 2025. What do you got, Shane?
Yeah, well, first of all, we went 1 for 2 on both of those predictions for 2025, which is much better than we did in our college football predictions before the season started. So you did nail Arizona going to a bowl game.
I did,
but we'll leave it at that. Favorite Arizona. I want to do some awards.
Okay, yeah.
I would say called the Shaney Awards, but that
okay, Shaney Awards. Let's do it.
Shaney's, the Shaneys. Okay. So Program of the Year, Arizona Program of the Year for the second straight year. Got to be the women's triathlon team, right? Okay. I mean, high profile program or not, you can't argue with national championships. They won their second in a row, prime for a three-peat next year as well. Student athletes of the year. I think it's a toss-up between Kelly Wetland, who won the individual national title for the triathlon team, and men's tennis player, former Wildcat Country guest Colton Smith, who was one of the best men's NCAA tennis players in the country this past year. So let's say Kelly Wetland is the female student athlete of the year. Colton Smith is the male student athlete of the year.
Okay.
And then I'm going to mention, going into what your actual question was, top 3 moments. I'm going to say Mason White's single versus North Carolina to get Arizona into the College World Series.
Awesome. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Caleb Love's shot against Iowa State. It's got to be up there. It may be number 1. Arizona went on to win that game in overtime thanks to Caleb Love's shooting in overtime as well. And then you got to throw in football, and I think the play of the year to this point, and hopefully we'll top it in the Holiday Bowl. But you got to go with Trayton Stukes mossing of whichever ASU wide receiver that was in the Territorial Cup game. Fantastic interception, one of the best interceptions of the year in all of college football. and arguably the second most high profile interception in the history of that rivalry behind Chuck Cecil in '86. But that's a whole other discussion. And I'll give an honorable mention to the volleyball team's NIVC championship, which is a great run. It wasn't the NCAA tournament, but it was a fantastic run, all at McHale Center. We had Coach Stubbs on afterwards to talk about it. So I want to mention them as well. So those are my highlights for the year.
All right, I'm going to go chronologically here. I mean, the basketball team, which I gave no chance to make the tournament. I did not make that an official prediction last year, and I'm glad that I did not because it was not very good. They gave us a hell of a run in the Big 12, getting to the Sweet 16 against Duke. The game against Oregon was a total thrill in the round of 32. So that's one I put up there. Obviously, the run by Arizona baseball, which we did not expect much, and we had Chip Hale on, we had Andy Lopez on. Which were great guests, and then they go and I had asked Chip, I was like, you haven't been able to win in the postseason. What are you going to do now? And they made it all the way to Omaha and won a game in Omaha, which is pretty awesome. So have to give them some credit there. I think for me though, I mean, just because I'm biased, Shane, the football team is what gives me memories. We came into the season and did not have very many expectations. The BYU game, sitting through a rainstorm and seeing BYU end up 11-2 this season was interesting. I mean, Arizona was right there with them. But I think for me, the thing that I will remember most about Arizona athletics, and there is a recency bias, I know, and the basketball team 13-0 in the non-conference, which is phenomenal. But that fourth quarter of the Baylor game was so surreal. It was 21-17 going into the fourth. Yep. You saw the stands start to fill up with the shirtless guys in sections 201 and 202. You had the Jabari man interception, which got run back, which put Arizona up by more than 3 scores. Just a surreal, the weather was closing in. You knew it was going to rain soon. It was a surreal time. And it was just kind of like a culmination of like, this team has made it. And they really proved it the next week with the win in Tempe, which unfortunately I wasn't able to go to. But you and I will be there on Friday night. And to see another 10-win season is something, Shane, that for me, I would never have pictured in any predictions that we would have made. There is no possible way I would have found 10 wins for this Arizona football team.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and go ahead to your next topic because I know you happen to give me the rundown, and that was biggest surprise. And to me, it's a tie between baseball and football. And I'd probably lean baseball because they went from it was just a great story. They went from winning the final Pac-12 tournament to the first Big 12 tournament they were a part of, which was a feel-good story in itself. They had to replace a lot of pitching from the previous year, and they did it. Then they escaped the Oregon Regional thanks to a couple other teams. And then after getting annihilated by North Carolina in the first game of Super Regionals, they come back and grind out back-to-back wins with Bill Belichick in attendance to advance to Omaha. And Chip Hale became one of the few to ever advance to the College World Series as a player and a coach at the same program. But yeah, the football program, and I'll just say this, even before we go into the SMU game, I know 10 wins sounds a lot better than 9, but this has already been a massive success. I mean, beating SMU, winning the Holiday Bowl would be awesome. I won't pretend like it's not. I mean, we felt great after Arizona won the Alamo Bowl a couple of years ago, at least for a couple of weeks. But to go, 10 wins and then 9 wins, Brett Brennan's turned things around. The coaching staff's turned things around. And so it's regardless of what happens, as long as Arizona doesn't lay a complete egg in the Holiday Bowl, I think we should all go into the offseason feeling very good about where the program's at.
For me, they have been the biggest surprise. I mean, baseball was cool, and they went on a nice run, and that was great. And the comeback against North Carolina, I think you nailed that. But football, Shane, just when I look at a team that overachieved by a long way, there's no way, and I can't say this enough, that any of us, nobody in their right mind, let's just put it that way, would have predicted that Arizona wins 10 games this year. You wouldn't, and you can say whatever you want, but the fact is, honestly, did you believe it? Did you really think that Arizona was going to win 10 games? Because I sure the hell didn't. Yeah,
well, even 9. Yeah.
No, I mean, even 8, Shane.
Yeah.
I said 6-6 would be great. Arizona wins the bowl game, goes 7-6.
I said they could go win 5 games, and I'd feel good about the season as long as they were, going in the right direction and they were, losing close games and being more competitive. But they blew the doors off that prediction.
You and I had a chance to talk with Brent Brennan in May, at the Arizona event in Scottsdale, and we both came away impressed that he was more candid than he had been before. He was real. He dropped some interesting language with us.
Yeah. Well, let's just note that I mean that was obviously intended to be an off the record conversation, but I mean I know
Well,
we've
right.
talked about the gist of it, but that's one of the reasons why he was more candid. That we weren't holding out a microphone or anything. It was just it was kind of just like guys talking football, which is one of the things we love most about doing this podcast as well.
Yeah. And, I think that we really just needed to, I think when we saw that, we had a little bit more confidence in Brent Brennan, but we still wouldn't have imagined that it would have turned into this.
Yeah.
And just really, it's been an exciting, November to go 5-0 with
Yeah.
that schedule, 3 road games. Come on.
Four come from behind wins. Four
Yeah.
down at halftime, 4 games in a row, and I mean not by much, but still, and to win them all is amazing.
And I'm really interested to see how you're going to pick this game at the end. Now we know what Barrett's going to do, and you pretty much know what I'm going to do, but I have literally no idea what you're going to do for picking the game at the end.
And I'll tell you what, I didn't know either until a little while ago.
Okay.
Because it is, I mean, without going into the prediction, it is one of the more interesting bowl matchups. I mean, it's not, the two program names don't, it's not like a marquee matchup in that regard, but it's a very competitive, even matchup in a lot of ways. So it's one of the harder ones to predict.
It really is. But I have an angle on it, and you'll want to hear that. All right, biggest disappointment in 2025.
I thought about this a little bit. I was going to be selfish and say, losing to BYU in double overtime because I was there for that game, even though we had a good time.
We did.
But I think I'd say the way that the Adia Barnes era ended in Tucson.
Great answer.
4 years earlier, inconceivable. You're bringing up on the program about the possibility of a lifetime contract, which didn't seem all that ridiculous at the time. And then for it, to go from that, and I don't think any of us were expecting, Arizona women's basketball to become a perennial championship contender. And they did okay the next couple of years, but they just kind of faded. And there was, talk about, inner turmoil and assistants leaving. And, it seemed like the writing was on the wall there. Adia Barnes was always generous with her time with us. And she had a great run. Look, she rebuilt the program, and I will give her full credit for having the fan base in place that Becky Burke and Arizona women's basketball enjoys. I think they were 6th in the country in average attendance for women's basketball. Again, I've said this a number of times. I covered the women's basketball team 20 years ago when Joan Bonvicini was the head coach, and U of A was a good team that year. They were co-Pac-10 champions along with Stanford. Stanford was a great team, as we saw a few years ago. But they averaged maybe 3,000 fans a game. And now they're doing 6, 7, 8,000 fans a game. And so to have that built-in support is great for Becky Burke as she comes in and tries to turn the program around.
Yeah, and Becky was a great hire by Desiree Reed-Francois, who seemed to press the right buttons. I'd say the biggest disappointment for me outside of the way the Adia Barnes era ended at Arizona is the softball team. We had higher hopes for them, and they just didn't
come together. Yeah.
And we're gonna find out what they're made of in 2026, and this could be a make or break year for Caitlin Lowe. We'll see what Desiree wants to do there.
Yeah, and I think it's in team collegiate sports, the most important position in any sport is quarterback for football. Right behind that is a starting pitcher for softball, even more so than baseball.
Yeah.
Because you can ride one great pitcher all the way to the College World Series and maybe even beyond that. And Arizona just they've had some very good ones. I don't want to shortchange anyone, but they haven't had for a while a Jenny Finch or a Taryn Mowat or a Nancy Evans or Alicia Hollowell for a while now. And that's been the difference between them being a perennial College World Series contender like they were for a long time under Mike Andrea, and bowing out in the regionals or super regionals more recently.
Time to make a couple of picks that we will look back on in a year to see how we did. I will start, Shane. A couple of bold predictions for Arizona athletics in 2026. Number 1, I believe the Arizona men's basketball team will make the Final Four. I think the Final Four jinx is broken. Listen, Shane, I won my fantasy football league after 29 years.
Anything's possible.
0 for 28. And I finally won, something I never thought I would do in life. Arizona has not made the Final Four in soon to be 25 years, and I believe that will be broken come April. And I think, I'm not saying they're going to win the national title, but for the purpose of this prediction, Arizona will make the Final Four. That's number 1. Number 2, I believe that either baseball or softball will make Omaha or Oklahoma City. I'm gonna, leave myself a little room for
I should have
hedging
done that
there.
last year. Yeah.
Right. And third, that Arizona football, despite a tougher schedule, will end with a winning record in 2026.
Okay.
That's the you can call. I've got a little boldness in there, but
Not some
there are my
boldness.
three predictions. What do you got?
Well, and it's bold just because, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I'll save that for just a second. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but you won your fantasy football championship with Tyler Shuck at quarterback. Is that
I
right?
did. I did.
Okay.
It was.
That
You listen. I drafted my first three picks were Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nakua, and in a third round reversal, Trey McBride, who I ended up trading away. But I went 3 for 3. I absolutely nailed those three picks, and it broke my 28-year drought. So thankful for that. If I can do that, then anything's possible.
and Arizona can make the Final Four. That drought was longer than Arizona's Final Four drought, so that gives us hope going into the new year. All right, I just got two of them,
Okay.
and I stayed away from men's basketball as you probably thought I would. I'm glad you tackled that one. I'm going to go with women's basketball, and I'm going to make the bold prediction that they will win at least 6 conference games.
Okay.
Which is quite a bit considering that it's a full rebuild for them. And they lost a close opener, but so it's. Do I believe that's going to happen? I don't know, but I think it's possible. And you want a bold one? There's a bold one for you. Maybe not the most exciting, but a bold prediction nonetheless.
Bold prediction. Okay, fair.
And this one's a bit of a downer, but kind of my style. And this, I guess it depends on which one you think is bolder. I'm going to say the football team. The football team doesn't win more than 7 regular season games in 2026. So I guess, look, we could meet in the middle there. We could both be right if they win 7, right? But look, partly because the schedule is just more difficult, at least it looks like that as of now, and partly because of all the talent and senior leadership they're going to lose after the season. I believe in the staff's ability to evaluate talent and bring it to Tucson, even though they've lost a couple key pieces of that staff and hopefully won't lose any more. I think back to what Barrett's told us about the 1999 season and how many leaders Arizona lost after that 12-win season in 98, where they finished without winning the Holiday Bowl. And I think it's going to be difficult to replace those guys. Even if Noah Fafita returns, which there's nothing to suggest that he won't at this point. Arizona's going to have a lot of holes to fill, both in terms of talent and leadership. And that's going to be, I think, a bigger struggle than some people might expect in 2026, in my opinion.
Well, it should be fun. We'll evaluate these in another 52 weeks. But before we bring on Barrett Baker and Reggie Geary to talk, I want to remind you that, as always, we are very glad to have renewed our partnership with Harrah's Auction Casino for another year. And where can you get $15 in free slot play today? At Harrah's Auction Casino. Want more? At Harrah's Auction, just sign up for Caesars Rewards and $15 is yours. Plus, earn up to $100 in additional free slot play. Caesars Rewards, the nation's #1 players card, and Harrah's Auction is the only local casino that has it. Use your $15 to earn perks at more than 50 destinations from coast to coast. And that free slot play could earn you dinner in Vegas, hotel stays in New Orleans, and more. What are you waiting for? Sign up today, take a spin with your $15 in free slot play and earn up to $100 more. Harrah's Auction Casino is your home for free slot play and more. Play for all. And here's a good one for you. In January, they're calling all high rollers 55 and over. Be an early bird and play the Lucky Kiosk game. Win one of the fabulous prizes of $10 to $500 in free slot play, $15 to $50 in food credits, or some extra reward credits. So if you're of that age and want to check out Harrah's Auction Casino on Wednesdays in January, it can be lucrative for you. Coming up next, Barrett Baker, Reggie Geary, a 2-guest show for the second straight week here on Wildcat Country.
All right, Wildcat fans, let's talk about crushing your workouts with the Ice Shaker 40-ounce Legend Series shaker bottle. It's made from kitchen-grade stainless steel, leak-proof, tough as nails, built-in straw, soft touch handle, and yeah, it keeps your drinks cold for a long time. I got mine in both Wildcat Red and Blue. Be sure to get yours at iceshaker.com.
Shane, there aren't very many people who have seen this team in person win some of the biggest games of the year, other than the great Reggie Geary, who calls games on the road with Brian Jeffries. You may remember him, well, in the NBA, as a former Wildcat letter winner and star. And now he gives back. He works for the university, and he gets to call games with Brian. What a life. I'm telling you what. There are people you can be envious of. Reggie Geary is one that I'm, just gotta say that. Hey, all right, Reggie, this team 13-0. They look unbelievable. Number one in the country. Are they as good as their ranking? I mean, is this team, should they be number one, or do you think, okay, they beat everybody, but maybe not the best team in the country?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I would hesitate, being this early in the season, being, ranked this high, a number one in the nation. But I think it's very fitting for this team. They came into the season with a lot of excitement. That was the one thing everybody was kind of hearing coming out, that, Tommy Lloyd and staff were really excited about this group. And then you kind of put eyes on them, and over time, they've just, in terms of a start for a season, how they've gone about this with Florida and all the ranked opponents they beat, just a very mature approach. So I think number one, even though it's kind of scary to say, is I think suited for them right now. It's more importantly, can they be there at the end of the year?
Reggie, what's the one thing maybe that surprised you the most about this team so far?
Just how quickly they picked up, Coach Tommy Lloyd's philosophies and kind of what his expectations are them. It seems like they're already mid-season in terms of how far they progress in offense. They just all have understanding that they've accepted their roles. They've been very mature about, how they've gone about things, especially the freshmen. You look at that freshman group, there was a lot of accolades around them. Obviously, Koa Pete being a 5-star, Braden Burry's another 5-star, a lot of expectations, and they fulfill those to a degree. But, when you look at Evan Karchinkov, and what he's brought to this team, great surprise there. Dwayne Aristo, another freshman. So we knew we had in veterans, but this freshman group has been very, very special.
One of the things that Tommy Lloyd preached, I know, toward the end of last season is his mentality of so what, now what? The team gets in a little bit of trouble. They say, okay, it happened. What are we going to do about it? I feel like that's really come through on the road. They're behind late against UConn, and they find a way to win. UCLA was a grind, and they won that game. They're down 2 at Alabama, took care of business in the second half. Do you think that this team, are you surprised at how well this team sort of embraces that mentality, especially with so many freshmen, like you mentioned?
To a degree, a lot has been made about the maturity of this freshman group and their day-to-day work ethic and how they go about their business. You can't overlook the veterans. A lot of these comebacks, a lot of these late game heroics. You're talking about Jaden Bradley, someone who was disrespected, going into preseason kind of reviews, but he's played like an All-American and he's a closer, and so you can play him heavy minutes. He takes great care of the basketball. And he's just a leader. And then you have Toby Awaka, maybe the best rebounder in the country, with his maturity and kind of how he goes about his business. You have Delly, Del Orso, in terms of his shot making. So you just have this really great balance of young and old, where when they get into these situations, there isn't a lot of panic. And they've shown that, and Tommy Lloyd has shown the ability where he doesn't panic late. And that's why I think they pulled out some of these victories.
So, Reggie, when you look at Arizona's schedule here in the Big 12, they open up at Utah, Kansas State at TCU, ASU at UCF, Cincinnati, and then West Virginia. So you can make an argument that 7-0 in the conference is possible. Then things get fun. And as we go later on, they play currently 6 teams ranked in the top 17 in a 7-game stretch. And Baylor is unranked, but you never know. If they go on a roll, they could be ranked as well. You're looking at potentially 7 ranked teams in a row. As a team that hasn't been accustomed to losing it all, how do you, as somebody who's been a player and faced a gauntlet of schedule and been a coach and assistant coach who's, directed players, how do you kind of keep their focus? Hey, you guys, if they lose one, how do you kind of keep them saying, all right, we're not going to let this spiral. This is a tough schedule. We know you're going to, trip up here. How do you give some kind of strategies that you would give to those players?
Yeah, good question. First and foremost, where the team's at number one and kind of going into Big 12 play, there's an opportunity they're going to be number one for a while. When you look at those Big 12 teams they open with, you're talking about some of the teams that were kind of predicted to come in the bottom half. And so there is an opportunity for Arizona to go on a run there and continue their run. But actually, as you mentioned, it's a gauntlet towards the end. And so you never expect, as a head coach, you never expect, or even as a player, to go undefeated throughout the year. If that's something that happens, that it happens, but it's obviously very, very rare. So I think once you take that first L, you kind of just go that old adage saying, hey, we're not going to go undefeated this year, guys. Let's, and you quickly get over it and you move on to the next one. If they start piling up and you start getting 3 and 4 losses in a row, well, then that's maybe something to address. But I think you double down. You're having a great season. You challenge the players and say, hey, let's see if we can go undefeated. Let's see how far we can take this. And if it doesn't occur, then you adjust. But one thing I'll say about this group, and I'll keep mentioning, is that maturity, is that they don't seem to get too high or too low. So I think if they do hit a tough patch in the schedule, I think they'll be able to kind of find their way out of it.
You've been, I believe you've called the Florida, UConn, and UCLA games, correct? All on the road. Did you call? Yeah. So all three of this. Which was to you was the most impressive win? I mean, Arizona once again found themselves behind at stages in all three of those games, and late was able to kind of come up clutch. I thought all three times. I thought they're done. I mean, I'm that guy watching as a fan. They're done. They're done. They're not going to win this game. Shane, I know you're giving me that look, but
Yeah,
it's true. You
6
know how I
minutes into
am.
the Florida game, he's like, "Well, they look
I did.
terrible. Season's over."
This is
You didn't say season was over, but you might have been thinking.
No, I didn't. But if you had been sitting next to me, you guys both would have been disgusted. I'm like, this team doesn't have it. They're done. All right. Well, clearly I'm an idiot. Which game to you was most impressive?
Man, great question. For the games that I've worked, and I thought, I didn't work the Florida game, but obviously
Okay.
incredibly impressive.
Right.
For me, the UConn win, that was big. First real road test. Everything had kind of been neutral site or at home. Alabama, I thought I liked the matchup there. I'm going to go with Alabama, in all honesty. I thought the second half of Alabama was about as dominant a performance as I've seen out of a young Arizona team in a long, long time. One thing about Arizona that people don't realize until you actually get, face to face with them is how big this team is. This is a big, almost NBA sized team. And just the way they're able to use that size advantage on both ends of the floor to dominate. And we've seen this now time after time, especially the last couple of weeks, where in that second half, I mean, they're just annihilating people. And they're doing it with a plus 20, 25 on the rebounds. They're doing it with almost between 10 and 20 offensive rebounds. The points in the paint. And now, obviously, Braden Burry's going the way he's going now with the multiple 20-point games and Koa Pete. And it just seems all be coming together. But that Alabama second half, very, very impressive in my mind, just in terms of just domination.
Yeah, Reggie, I was at the San Diego State game. I think it was the best defensive performance of the season. Even in the first half when the offense was struggling, they still managed to be up a point at halftime. So I'm going to pull an Eric Cohen. This is the best Arizona defensive basketball team since
1994 Final Four team.
Okay.
Well, there we go. There we go.
I'm obviously there's been a lot of great defensive teams over the year. Got a lot of great defensive players. We've had shot blockers. We've had but this team, like I say, they've really done a nice job. That San Diego State game, as you mentioned, the numbers were incredible in terms of percentages and keeping field goal percentages down. It was a pretty consistent Aztec team from the 3-point line. They shot off to 41%. I think they shot like 7% or just so they're doing ridiculous stuff. And once again, I think Ivan Karchinkov is kind of the anchor for that defense. I'm gonna start saying that more and more. I think he's a special defensive player and we saw that first in the UConn game, where he was just kind of a shutdown fitter that Tommy Lloyd could kind of put him on the team's best player if the matchups worked and he could shut somebody down. And they've been great. The switching defense has been fantastic. One thing that goes overlooked is Tobe Awaka. As his ability to switch at the 4 and 5 position onto the perimeter. Right. We've seen him guard point guards, shooting guards. He's able to keep, contain and contest. That is a huge value to Tommy Lloyd and to that defensive, philosophy he has. So they've been lights out, and that's going to carry them a long way.
One of our former guests, Casey Jacobson, put together like a four-piece criteria for a Final Four team, and one of them was future first-round NBA draft picks. How many future first-round picks, whether next season or beyond, do you think are on this team?
Good question. I would like to think there's at least 5.
Yeah.
You got I mean, you got the young kids. There's probably 3 or 4 in that class. I think Jaden Bradley is the guy who's going to get serious consideration for that type of a look, because his ability just to run it, he's just getting better and better, and he's just showing his brilliance night in, night out. Tobe Awaka, for the right team and his ability to rebound, he's going to be the best rebounder in the country, folks. And there's no question about that. And the numbers prove that. And so there's going to be a team out there like him and Mo Kribis at 7'2", and I can go down the line. Yeah. So I think that number's pretty high when you're talking about the Cats.
Let's talk a little bit about Big 12 road trips and the ones that you went on last year. What was the most intimidating environment that you saw firsthand last season?
Man, I thought Kansas, obviously, Kansas is pretty intimidating just because of the history and some of the pageantry there. It's a special experience. I've been telling people here in Tucson, hey, if you get a chance and you can get to Allen Fieldhouse, you want to definitely do that. I thought Iowa State was a pretty intimidating atmosphere. Unfortunately, we didn't have a great first half there, so it never really kicked off. But I thought, like, I was looking around like this place could jump. But in all honesty, the Big 12 has a lot of great basketball arenas. Cincinnati has a fantastic Texas Tech. West Virginia keeps shooting a gun off every 6 seconds. There's just all these great little environments, and I think they all can be intimidating to some degree. And I forgot one, BYU is really, I mean, they pack the place, they're on their feet, they're engaged in the kind of the high octane offense style they play there. That place lights up. So I gave you a kind of a lot of answers there, but I do like Iowa State, BYU, Kansas. I love them all.
Of all the environments that you remember playing in as a player in college, what was the toughest
Toughest.
that stands out just off the top of your head?
I like MacArthur Court in Oregon, the old school one. It had that Coliseum feel. It was kind of straight up. I think Indiana, I think the Hoosier Dome is very similar to that, the old school one where the last row on the top is in line with the first row on the bottom. So it's kind of like you're in this Coliseum type deal. 3 of my 4 years, we went in there with Damon Stoudemire, and so they had knives out for the guy because he had left them, and so that made it just for a great environment. That's the one that really stands out. We played a lot of neutral site games as well, but for those kind of traditional ones, I liked Oregon.
Reggie, you guys, I mean, just looking at, I don't remember each individual game, but just looking at the scores, you guys, I know it was tough, but you sort of cruised to the Final Four. I mean, neither game was very close at the end. What was it, if you could pinpoint one or two things that really prepared you the most for making that run?
Yeah, well, the biggest part was we knew who we were at that when we got to that point of the year. We knew who our priorities were. We knew how we were going to play as a team. We had been battle tested as this team is being battle tested and it will continue to be. And so we had been We had been to Hawaii and played Kentucky and had a heartbreaking loss there and knew what that felt like. We had gone through the gauntlet of the Pac-10. And so we were battle tested and there wasn't a lot of panic. And we had obviously a little PTSD as well, basketball PTSD, in that we had lost the previous year in the first round. And
All
so
right.
we had additional motivation. We had this, we knew who we were as a team and we had been battle tested. And luckily, we put ourselves in position being a high seed, staying on the West Coast, allowed that Arizona fan base to kind of follow us from LA to Sacramento and kind of really set us up for a nice run. And this Arizona team could do the same type deal.
Quick follow up on that. Losing your last regular season game at ASU, which I know is like beneath any U of A fan. Did that kind of put a chip on your guy's shoulder going to the tournament, or did that not make a difference one way or the other?
I mean, thank you for bringing that up. And,
Sorry. I wasn't going to bring up the tournament games for the years prior.
yeah, no, I mean, obviously, anytime you play your in-state rival and you come up a little short, it's always painful.
But I mean, that pissed you guys off going to the tournament a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, one thing about being at Arizona, I mean, you always have a target on your back,
yeah.
and they're always coming after you, and so that never really changes. Coach Olson was always big on like, hey, if it doesn't fire you up, being an Arizona Wildcat, then I'm talking, you're at the wrong place because you knew, every single night you were for the most part the favorite, and you had to bring out your best. So I don't know if it was an additional. We just wanted to win every single night, make the guy proud, and make the city proud.
All right, I two more for you, and I'll let Eric finish. And we asked AJ Bramlett this, so I'll ask you the same question. Are there any similarities between Lute Olson and Tommy Lloyd? I know they're come from very different generations, but is there anything they do that Tommy does that kind of reminds you of Lute?
Yeah, I do. I think they're both player coaches. They're very, very casual in their approach with a kind of a quiet intensity behind it. But I think they are players coaches, and I think they want there to be accountability in the program, but at the same time they want to be a relaxed atmosphere. Coach was always cool. Coach Olson was always cool. There was no panic in him. We came to work every single day. I thought he was fair. I think Tommy's fair. If you give him, if you work hard and do the right things, he praises you. If not, he tries to, constructively criticize you or constructively make you better. And so a lot of similarities. I think, from being around Tommy, seems like he loves being in Tucson. Coach Olson loved being in Tucson, loved being part of this community. And I think that's why both gentlemen have been embraced.
All right, last question for you, Reggie. Without getting too deep into the weeds here, outside of Arizona, how many Big 12 teams are capable of getting to the Final Four, in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. Obviously Houston, they've looked really, really good this year. I know they've had the one loss in Tennessee, but other than that, they've been absolutely fantastic. Iowa State, they've been an early surprise like Arizona has been in terms of a top five program, and the job that they do there and some of the returners they have they have the ability to go into a long run. Never discount Kansas. I know they're banged up a little bit, Peterson with the hamstring. But when they're healthy, I think the vibe feels different there. I think there's a lot more confidence in the building. And so, I think Coach Self can always go on a run late in the season. You never know there as well. So I think those are three strong ones. Cincinnati and Texas Tech. Texas Tech, obviously, the big win versus Duke. Coming back the way they did, 17 showed a lot of character. TJ Toppin, returning player of the year. I think there's four teams right there that could be a third week team in the NCAA tournament.
All right, Reggie, last one for you. This is kind of an over-under question. If I were to give you the number at 13 and a half for Arizona's wins in an 18-game Big 12 schedule, would you take the over or the under?
I take the over. I
Okay.
take the over. Yeah, I just think once again, this team is, I think, just as good as they are in the size they bring in defensively and just what they do. I think they could be very, very strong and could be right there at the top, towards the end.
Well, we always appreciate having you on the show. Great insight. Would love to do it again soon. Happy New Year and bear down.
Yeah, bear down, everybody. Happy New Year. Thanks, Eric Shane. Thanks, guys.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Off air, Shane and I were discussing, our favorite guest to have on, just for relaxed, sitting at a bar, hanging out. And this guy comes to the top of the list every time. He is our most popular guest in terms of number of appearances and probably comments on our YouTube feed because people love him. He is Barrett Baker. He works for the Tucson Fire Department. He is the man. Former special teams standout for the University of Arizona, and he's kind of our resident Wildcat Country football analyst. So we're always glad to welcome you back. Big game on Friday night. Can't even believe it's happening. But first, before we get to that, Barrett, we had you on along with Brad Brennan before the ASU game. Just give me your thoughts on what you saw in Tempe. 5 turnovers from the defense. Not the prettiest performance on offense, but an absolute ass kicking.
Just whatever you said, multiply it by 2, and that's kind of where I stand on it. I think anytime that you can win that game, obviously, just for a overall program standpoint, right? Arizona football, at the end of the day, the Territorial Cup is a big deal. And I think this is the beauty of college football, and we've talked about it so many times before, how quickly things can change. But, we're 2 of the last 3 Territorial Cup winners, and to go up there and do it at Sun Devil Stadium or whatever it's called now, that it's just a huge moment for the program. And we did that with authority. And the scoreboard necessarily didn't show it. Obviously, the frustration in the first half, knowing that we were far better and we just weren't able to make a couple of the big plays that we would normally need to make. But we were physically better. We were faster, bigger, stronger. And at the end of the day, the best team won, and we did it authoritatively. And there was no doubt for this year who's the best team in the state of Arizona, and that is the Arizona Wildcats.
Well, speaking of ASU Stadium, Arizona's handed ASU 2 of its last 3 losses at home. Maybe we should start calling it Casino del Sol Stadium North and get some revenue from that as well.
Blame it.
One more question about ASU. And we saw Ken Dillingham sign a contract extension to ASU and presumably spurn Michigan, even though he said he never got contacted by them. I'm okay with it, even though I know a lot of U of A fans were rooting for him to go because we want to see them go back down to the bottom again. I want to see this game be as big as possible every year, and with Dillingham and Brent Brennan there, it seems more likely. Be honest, would you rather ASU be decent every year, so it's a bigger game, or would you rather ASU lose every game it plays?
I would rather them be extremely good and then knock them off and make it burn a little bit more. And I think that that's more fun when we do that. I can go all the way back to 1997 when they were on their way to the Fiesta Bowl, and we go up there and just knock the heck out of them and knock them out of that. And I've said it before, but when you can take that fan base and that stadium and they go away, heartbroken and sad and frustrated and have to sit on that for the next 364 days, that's the actual goal of a rival. And when we can do that, it puts a huge smile on my face. I think he's the right guy for them. And I think Coach Brennan's the right guy for us. And when you take that, you're going to get the best out of both programs. And let's see what happens at the end of the year. I'm confident that we're going to continue to play very, very well.
So wait, I'm the only one of the three of us that wants ASU to lose every game all year.
But you know what, Eric, you're probably in the majority there. Just real quick, I talked to Mike Bercovici, former ASU quarterback, for the second book I wrote about this rivalry, and I asked him, my last question to him was the same question I just asked you, Barrett, which is, would you rather U of A be good, so it's a bigger game, or would you rather they lose every game? And I've never heard someone struggle with a question more than that. Like he went back and forth for like 30 seconds and then finally said, no, I can't do it. I hate them. I want to see them lose every game. So
and to your point, I do love it when they lose. I mean, I don't like it when
I'm
they
not
win.
saying root for them.
Right. I don't like it when they win. I would rather them be a laughingstock, but I think the pride of victory is accentuated when they're both top 25 programs going into that game. It's Alabama against Auburn at that point. It just means a little something else. So there's two trains of thought there. If they're 0-11 going into that game, then I'd be pleased as could be. And if they're 11-0 going in that game, then so be it, because they're going to lose 11-1.
Reflecting on the season, and I know we still got a big one, chance to win 10 games for the second time in 3 seasons. Reflecting on this season, Barrett, what are your big takeaways in terms of just how special a group this has been, especially relative to the expectations?
Well, I really think you hit it there. It's a special group. We can go back and look at our podcast from a year ago and where the program was. And if you look at the social media component of where the program was, preseason, where the program was, picked to be 15th. This program was written off by pundits from all across the country. Our own fans, we're not buying into this program. But the ones that matter, and we matter, of course, as well, so I don't mean to downplay that, but the ones that matter are the 105 kids on the team and the coaches and that, family that puts in the work throughout all of the off season, throughout the summertime, throughout, the spring workouts, all of that, to make it come together the way it did, to battle through some adversity early in the season with 2 heartbreaking losses. And they didn't stop believing. And they believed in the coaches. They believed in each other. A lot of talent on that team. And, when they catch fire and end out on the winning streak that we have, I'm happy for them. And I have no problem. This sounds arrogant, but I'm so proud of my team for being the best team in Arizona history in 12-1. I want that for another squad. I want that for another 105 kids that then would be able to say, no, it was my team that was the best one. And so I think when you look at Dalton and some of those guys trading that have been here for, 5+ years, and they've been from the highs to the lows and back to the highs, what an awesome reward for them.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Eric and I talked about it. I want to get your take because I have mine as far as what was the most impressive single play for Arizona football this season, in your opinion?
Ooh, good one, Shane.
Yeah, I think as a defensive back, when you look at the interception that Traden did against Arizona State, I don't know if people realize how difficult that play was.
Yeah, that's mine too. Yeah.
It's just there's no shortage. I would always err for the side of the defense because you are trying to copy 11 guys on the other side that they know what they're doing. They have it schemed up. They have the advantage. They have every single advantage they could possibly have. And for a defensive back to be able to turn and run on a post pattern full speed on a perfectly thrown ball, I might have
Yeah, it's a good throw.
Right? That is going to drop right into the basket, full stride for that guy. And for Traden to be able to not only keep up with the speed and someone running away from you, but then to look back and track a ball coming down at an angle 50 yards downfield and time a jump over the receiver and intercept it, that's one that you could just take 100 or 1,000 guys, and there's going to be one guy that can make that play, and he did it, and it was an awesome play.
That was an all-time play. You're right. He made it look easier than it really was, and you can attest to that. I'm not nearly as athletic to be able to do anything. I never was. So, hell of a play. Let's talk about SMU here in this game. They were a game away from being in the ACC championship game. They go out to Cal, they lay an egg, they're done. They probably, the way things would have shaken out, they probably can look at their season and say, we would have beaten Virginia and we would have made we very well could have made the college football playoff had they beaten Cal. What do you expect their motivation to be playing in this game versus what could have been?
I mean, I hope that they don't have motivation, and I hope that they show up flat and that, we take care of business for 60 minutes, because regret's a powerful thing. And when that team can go back and look at their schedule and some of the heartbreakers, I mean, the game against Miami was something else as well. And, but we have the same thing. We have a BYU and we have a Houston game that we can point to and say, my goodness, if we just had those two games. So that's the challenge that their coaching staff is going to have. And it's the challenge that our coaching staff is going to have. And if this makes any sense, Eric, you play the whole season to build up for that bowl game, right? You're going for the national championship. If you don't get that, you're going for your conference championship. If you don't get that, you're going for the best bowl possible. But we don't hate SMU, and SMU doesn't hate us. So how do you find that motivation to lay it on the line after you've been off for 3 weeks or a month and say, we're going to go out there from the first whistle and attack and play like, lunatics and pick up where you left off? So Coach Tomey, as we've talked about 1,000 times, the N on the helmet was not today for Nebraska. That was the motivation that Coach Tomey used to try to galvanize us and understand what the mission was. I think Coach Brennan, what is the mission? To be the 5th team in Arizona history that wins 10 games. And I think that's a powerful thing, to put yourself in the history books of Arizona football. That's what you have to be able to do to make sure that you're redlined when January 2nd shows up. So for SMU, I'm not quite sure what their motivation is, but that's for Coach Lashley to try to come up with something to where, his 100 guys are ready to go.
What's the number one key to Arizona winning this game, in your opinion?
Turnover margin has always been something that's, especially in bowl games, special teams and turnover margins, those win or lose bowl games, because we're going to be rusty. I mean, we were playing fantastic ball at the end of the year. We were a buzzsaw and we were going to take care of anybody. But guess what? Now we've been off that game speed. It's thrown off a little bit. We're going to have some guys that are healthy, hopefully. But, to Coach Brennan's point, kids are going to go home. They're going to meet up with their families. They're going to decide what's best for their future. And so I'm not quite sure what our Arizona Wildcats are going to look like on January 2nd either. So there's a few unknowns. But again, just getting back to your basic question, the big play is really something, that momentum play. And usually you get those from special teams or turnovers. And I would be I would certainly think that will be the case for this game as well.
Barrett, Arizona's been behind at halftime each of its last 4 games. Not by much, but they've been behind, and they've won all of them. They haven't allowed a single point in the second half in their last 2 games. So obviously, the defense coming together is the big reason why they've rallied in the second half of these games. What are you seeing on the field, if anything, in terms of? I know we like to use the word adjustments, but like, what's the difference between maybe early in the game where Arizona gives up an early score or two, then later in the game where they just shut the offense down?
Yeah, great question. I think Coach Gonzalez has kind of hit on this a few times, and even Coach Brennan to that point. How are they going to attack you? How are they going to block you? And the first couple series of a game, they might be given a different look. They might be blocking you a little bit differently with their scheme. And I think Cincinnati was a great example of that. Boy, that looked bad, didn't it? For the first 2 series. I mean, they were gashing us on the run. And sometimes it's just where your fit is and who's filling a gap and, who's doing a twist or this or that. So we've talked about, I think, Peyton Manning once famously said that, halftime adjustments are the most overrated thing in the world.
Right.
There really aren't a lot of tweaks. The defense is the defense. The offense is the offense. But once things slow down and you get those nervous jitters out and you can identify and things slow down a little bit, then I think that's kind of trusting the system, which is a cliche. But it really is just the identification of what are they hurting you with, and then what is the counter to that. So we talk about all the time. It's basically chess, and you have to really, again, that's where the guys that are in the booth up top, they have to be in great communication with Coach Gonzalez because he's at field level, and so seeing where those breakdowns are coming from and diagnosing, is it just a great play from them, and is it a guy that's missing a tackle, or are they schematically having an advantage on you? Our coaching staff does a great job of getting that intel, making the adjustments, and then the last and most important part is obviously for the players to just make it happen. So if you're missing tackles early in the game, play more physical. And I think Coach Brennan's hit that a few times where in the second half, it's like, okay, we've taken their best and now let's go out and punch them in the mouth. And we've really done a great job of doing that for 60 minutes.
Before the season started, you said you called for a return to violence for the defense, and I think they've answered that call and then some throughout the season. Two more for you, Barrett.
Sure.
Noah Fafita, I think he's had an outstanding season. The one word I would use to describe him is disciplined. I think he understands his strengths and his limitations. He very rarely makes a play that will hurt the team. How do you expect him to play in his final game as a junior?
I don't think any change, because now, he's unflappable there's nothing that they're going to see that he hasn't seen before. I think his leadership style is just so calm, correct? He doesn't get too up and he doesn't get too down. And I think that's important because there are going to be highs and lows over the course of any particular game. But how many starts does he have under his belt now? He's the all-time leading quarterback touchdown thrower, for lack of a better description. So he's going to play at a high level. And same thing, we haven't played SMU. They're going to give us a couple looks. I'm sure they're going to change things up on defense. And so it would not surprise me for a little bit of a slow start to figure out how they're going to attack us defensively as well. But I'm confident that Coach Dagey and him will obviously be able to get on the same page very quickly and then start slicing and dicing.
All right, last question for you, Barrett. Eric and I have debated this. Eric would like to see an expansion to the college football playoff to 24 teams, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. And and he noted that if that were the case this year, Arizona would be in the CFP. I think it's fine where it's at. In fact, I definitely wouldn't expand it more than it is. And my take is that, like the Alamo Bowl a couple of years ago, you win this game, you win the Holiday Bowl, you go into the offseason with a good feeling, as opposed to you get to the CFP and you lose, which, be a great opportunity, but most likely Arizona would not win the national championship. Every team in the CFP is going to be disappointed except for one, versus going out on a high note in say in winning the Holiday Bowl or winning the Alamo Bowl 2 years ago. What do you think?
I think that when you take a look at the logistics of the bowl season, in Arizona's case, we play on the January 2nd, and then the transfer portal opens up immediately after that. And we've got 2.5 weeks to make sure that we reshape the roster and plug some holes. So logistically, how do you do that if you are continuing to play in a playoff situation and Oregon and some, these top 8 teams that are left, when are they going to do their recruiting? When are you focusing on the opponent for the next week? And then how are you doing all of the things that are necessary to make a winning program? And that means, do you cut the season back to 10 games so you can add some additional time? And then after 10 games, are you really finding the best? So that's where my mind goes with it. I think logistically, it's very, very challenging. The football season is already fairly long. And you're really talking about adding another month to it almost when it comes to whittling it down for the championship. And I just don't know how you do that. So I don't mind the idea of it. But at this point, again, we already played 12 games. And, that's just a lot of stress on a program. And then how do you do all the rest of it?
Yeah. Well, and my point was really more just about like the good feeling going into the season.
Yeah.
Like after they won the Alamo Bowl, I know Jed left and that put a damper on things, obviously, but we watched that game. We felt great about, going into the next season, and we certainly feel the same way if they won the Holiday Bowl versus if, you're one and done in the CFP. That's kind of what
I think it's a valid point because, again, we talked about the whole season. You are working towards that bowl game, the best bowl game. And when you win, it's the cherry on top. You get the positive momentum. You get the positive energy. I think it's great for the fan base. It's good for at the end of the day, you're going to have 100 kids that have some sort of bowl ring. that they can look back on 27 years later and say I was part of that team. And so I tend to agree with you on that one. Sorry, Eric, but I love the crescendo to build up to one final game for that season and put a real cap on it.
All right, so a couple points here, and then I'll ask you my last question. I believe that the bowl season's about dead. All these guys opting out, it's eventually the sponsors are going to pull out because fans aren't going to want to travel to a destination to watch. If Noah Fafita wasn't playing and Genesis Smith wasn't playing and Dalton and Traden, teams are like that.
It's not just players opting out; it's teams opting out now too.
Coaches, Brent Brennan was leaving, Danny Gonzalez was gone, and you're left with, maybe Seth Dagey and a shell of a coaching staff. I mean, that's not like it's not great. So that's why I think the bowl season's in trouble. Second point is, in the last 18 years, maybe a little less than that, Arizona would have made a top 24 four times. 2009, 2014, 2023, and 2025. So if I told you that basically every 4 to 5 years, Arizona is going to be in that playoff, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, and the other thing is, Shane, I think if you won one game in that playoff, I think that gives you such a good feeling and a good start into next year to say, hey, we finished in the top 20. We won our first round game. We're one of the best 16 teams in the country. Now, you lose that first game, you get blown out. I understand it. But in my opinion, take that shot. I've never been one for expansion to the playoff, but what I've seen from these bowl games, and trust me, I'm watching them. I love to bet them. These are garbage. It's garbage. It's not good.
Garbage bowl games are nothing new, though, right? I mean, we've seen. I mean, when I was at ABC 15, I covered the Clemson Ohio State game where Clemson won like 31-0. That was
everybody
horrible
played in that game.
Yeah,
you don't see that now.
But
it's opt out. It's the transfer portal. It's this. You don't see that. It's a totally different. Comparing college football to the way it was 10 years ago it's a different game.
Well, that I agree with you.
All right, Barrett. 2 questions. First of all, best memory from the 1998 Holiday Bowl.
It's selfish, but I mean, I'll never forget being able to jump up on that stage with Chris and Kelvin and Coach Tomey and hoisting that trophy up, because it was the pinnacle on a personal level, on a team level. And, I can look back and see a picture of 2 of the greatest players that have ever put on that jersey when Chris and Kelvin, and the greatest coach that's ever led and had a huge impact on so many Wildcats. And so, I mean, that's probably hands down just what it was, because, you can get emotional talking about it, quite frankly, because it just goes by in the blink of an eye. And I'm so excited that these kids might have an opportunity to do that. But it was such a magical season, and we were a darn good team, and we would have beat anybody is the way we felt about it. And to beat the defending national champions and in a tough game, they were physical as heck.
Yeah, I was going to say, Barrett, as far as I'm concerned, the 1998 Holiday Bowl was the only Holiday Bowl that Arizona's ever competed in. Yeah. I don't want to think about anything else.
Yeah, hallelujah to that. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
great
Shane,
question.
For the rest of us who have been there.
Oh, I was too. I was too.
And I've told you this before. The first Arizona football game I ever attended in Arizona Stadium was on October 31st, 1998. And I was not an Arizona fan at the time. And I wore a Brett Favre jersey. I didn't want to support Oregon, but it was Halloween. So I wore a Brett Favre jersey to see Akili Smith, who went on to be the number 3 pick in the NFL draft.
38-3.
30, yeah, that's right. 38-3. Yep. I remember Kelvin Efon had a big game. And that was the last time I ever went in Arizona Stadium and did not root for the home team. Probably the last time ever that will ever happen.
Nice.
So I'm glad I got to see that team in person once that year. I just want to point that out. Give me a prediction. Friday night, SMU, Arizona, Holiday Bowl, maybe some rain in the forecast. We'll see. What's your score prediction and why?
The great question. I looked at something earlier. Do you realize that we averaged like 32.6 points per game and they averaged 32.9?
Wow.
So
there's a lot of similarities.
We're about as even as we can get. I was shocked to see that they're the favored team, which was offensive to me. So I think that we're going to have, dare I say, a home field advantage, because I think that we're going to travel well. San Diego is a great trip for us. And I think this is just a team that has the right chemistry. It has the right makeup. I think behind the scenes, I think Coach Dagey and Coach Gonzalez are just viciously competitive. And because of that, I think they're going to have a great game plan. And I think Coach Brennan understands the importance of putting the bow on this particular season and really leading us to a great offseason and having momentum for next year. So I think that it's going to be a tough game, but I think it's a 27-17 type of game. And I think that we'll come out on top.
Wasn't that the score of the 98 Holiday Bowl?
That one, no, it was 27-20.
It was a field goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, boy, how embarrassing.
I thought it was
Kelvin scored the last touchdown. We were down
20. Sorry, it was 23-20. My bad. Okay,
there we go.
20.
Yeah,
there we go. 27-17. Barrett's calling his shot. You'll see what Shane and I think in the final segment. But Barrett, as always, thank you for hanging out with us all year on this show. We love having you on as a guest. Happy New Year, and bear the heck down, or something like that.
Bear down, guys. We'll talk post game with a discussion on the greatness of the 2025 10-3 Arizona Wildcats.
Good to catch up with Reggie. Good to catch up with Barrett. We got Barrett's pick. We are going to make our picks for a bunch of bowl games, but let us start with the Big 12 opener for the Wildcats in basketball. Arizona at Utah, 2 p.m. Arizona time on Saturday. I'm going Wildcats by 11. The Utes are just an okay team. Arizona's 13-0, and this is not going to be the game that trips them up. What do you say, Shane?
Utah's arguably the worst team in the conference. They're actually the only Big 12 team that's sub 500 or sub 100 in net. They are 7-1 at home, and this is always a tricky trip for Arizona for whatever reason. They got Utah, if you haven't watched them, they got Terrence Brown, the transfer guard from FDU, who's averaging 21.5 points per game. Don McHenry is a transfer from Western Kentucky. He's averaging just over 19. Got a decent big man in Keanu Dawes, but Arizona's bigger. They're more talented. I think it's going to be a kind of ugly at times, just because it's a funky time of year. That's a tough trip. But I think Utah wins by, what did you have, 11?
Wait, you think Utah wins?
No, Arizona wins. Excuse me. Sorry.
You think Arizona
I mean to give
wins
everyone
by
a heart attack.
Arizona? I had him by 11.
Okay. Well, you know what? Last time you had San Diego State by 14, and I took them by 15. Yep. I have the 10 to 12 point range, so I'll be more optimistic. I'll say 12 points if you're saying 11.
So we're waiting to see as we make these picks. USC and TCU are playing. I went 3 for 3. You've gone 2 of 3 heading into that game. I have TCU and you have USC. I have TCU plus 6.5. Those so far they're winning at halftime. Will they hold on in the second half? So we'll update our pick standings as we go along here. I'll just run through. We have a list of games, Big 12 teams. But first we start with the ReliaQuest Bowl, a matchup of top 25 teams on Wednesday. Iowa against Vanderbilt. Vandy minus 4.5. You like Diego Pavia, the runner-up in the Heisman Trophy, and I like Iowa not only to cover that spread, but I think they win the game outright. We both like ASU plus 3 against Duke. Michigan is getting 8.5 in the Citrus Bowl against Texas. I think they covered. You have Texas covering. In the Vegas Bowl, you have Utah's minus 14 against Nebraska. Even without Kyle Whittingham, by the way, what a great move for Michigan to get him. I have Utah covering the 14. You have Nebraska plus the 14.
I got Utah winning, but I think that's just too big a spread.
In the Liberty Bowl, also on Friday, like Arizona, I have Navy minus 7 against Cincinnati, and you are taking the other side. But let's get to the New Year's 6 games, starting with December 31st, New Year's Eve. Ohio State is giving 9.5 to Miami. Which way do you lean, Shane?
I got Ohio State. I mean, it's going to be a low-scoring game, but I feel like this has like 23-10, something like that written all over it. I think Ohio State does enough to cover. I think the spread is about right, but I think Ohio State covers.
I think Ohio State will win by more than 2 touchdowns. My parents went to Miami. I hope they're not listening to the show. But I think Ohio State is better. They have not given up more than 16 points in a game this season, and I think they will be sharp coming off the loss to Indiana in the Cotton Bowl. 3 games on Thursday. Oregon giving 2.5 to Texas Tech. You and I are both taking the Red Raiders. You taking them outright, Shane, like I am?
Yeah. I got Texas Tech in the national championship game. So
yeah,
I'm a little surprised by the spread.
In the Rose Bowl, Indiana, this line is somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 against Alabama. You think Indiana is going to cover the 6.5, and I think Alabama is going to win the game outright. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Classic Rose Bowl matchup.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got Big Ten in there, but you don't think Indiana for the Rose Bowl. But no, I could see this being a nail biter of a game, but I think there's a little bit of bias in terms of just looking at the names and the uniforms. I mean, I think if you, it's tough to strip that away, but I think if you do, I think you'd see Indiana's at least a touchdown better than Alabama.
I don't like the fact that Indiana lost one of their better players celebrating after the game against Ohio
Yeah,
State.
that's not a good
not
sign.
a good sign. I think Alabama gets hot and runs the table there and
Wow.
makes it to the semifinals. And I think in the Sugar Bowl, we both like Georgia -6.5 against Ole Miss. I think that game will be lower scoring than a lot of people expect. So I'm playing the under 56.5. But let us get to Friday night's game, Snapdragon Stadium. 6 o'clock Arizona time. Arizona is a 3-point favorite over SMU. I'm not going to go as in depth as Shane is in my prediction, but I will say this. I believe that SMU feels, and we talked about this with Billy Embody on last week's show, that SMU feels like they should have been in the college football playoff. This was a team that had they beaten Cal, they would have been in the ACC championship game. They would have played Virginia. I think they would have beaten Virginia, and I think they would have gotten the
Agree.
number 12 seed in the college football playoff or thereabouts, and they would have potentially played Oregon. I think they would have jumped James Madison, though it would have been close. And I think this team really wonders, why are we playing in San Diego? We're focused on the transfer portal. I just don't think they want to be there that much. I think Arizona really wants to be there. Now, we don't know opt-outs. We don't know what things are going to look like until they actually get there. Will guys like Genesis Smith sit out? No idea. With that said, Arizona's defense has been great over the final 5 games. It has been over a month since they last played. I think they find a way in the fourth quarter to hold on. Give me Arizona 28, SMU 20, the Wildcats cover, and an under to start 2026 on the right note.
All right. Well, first of all, I think Barrett suggested that Arizona was an underdog for this game, but they're actually favored by 3 points, I believe. And I'll throw this out there. The only home game Arizona lost this year was the one I attended, and Arizona is 0-2 in bowl games I've attended, the 2009 Holiday Bowl and the 2014 Fiesta Bowl. So I apologize in advance for that. I think this will, like I mentioned in the first segment, I think it's going to be one of the best, most entertaining games of the bowl season. SMU is probably the second best team Arizona will have faced all season, right behind BYU. I put ASU up there if Levitt and Tyson were healthy, but they weren't. And like you, I'd probably take the under in this game. SMU's defense is interesting in that they produce a lot of sacks and turnovers. And in fact, this is a matchup between two of the top 4 teams in the country in takeaways per game. But SMU also gives up a lot of yards, especially through the air. They're 4th in the ACC in points allowed, but 11th in yards allowed. And they're next to last in passing yards allowed. So try to square that. I think SMU will get its points to a certain, probably mostly early on. We've seen that a bit, or quite a lot actually, with Arizona football recently. Even when their defense has been good, opponents, if they do score, it tends to be earlier in the game. I think the game will come down to Noah Fafita's decision making, which has been outstanding all season for the most part. You avoid turnovers, take a sack if you have to, live to fight another set of downs. Arizona's got to convert in the red zone, where SMU is actually very strong defensively, and Arizona's been shaky throughout the season. I think Arizona's going to be able to move the ball between the 20s and convert just enough in the red zone to squeak out a very close game. Hopefully it does not come down to the leg of Michael Salgado Medina. And then the last factor, as far as why I think this is going to be a very close game, simple. Gus Johnson's calling it. That means nail biter. That means, sounds that only dogs can hear. I'm glad I'm going to be there and not have to listen to that. I will take Arizona to win, but because Arizona, they just don't win when I pick them with the points. Okay. So I'm going to go Arizona 23, SMU 21. They win. They don't quite cover, but we all go home happy.
I hope anybody that is heading out there has a great time like we will. Let's hope it does not rain and we can stay dry. But I am really looking forward to it. There is no, and I'll say this again probably for the 3rd time on this show, under any circumstances, there is no way I would have expected Arizona to play their last game on January 2nd. Any way you looked at it.
Yeah.
The fact that we are starting 2026 with an Arizona bowl game is beyond belief. And the fact that, by the way, the men's basketball team is number 1. There's a lot to look forward to this year. I hope everyone out there has a happy and healthy new year, and let's hope it starts off well for our Wildcats. Want to thank Reggie Geary. Want to thank Barrett Baker, and of course Shane Dale, who I'll be hanging out with on Friday night at the Holiday Bowl. So for Shane, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. Happy New Year, and as always, bear down.